Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another episode on Talk Architecture Podcast. And I'm your host, Naziaty Mohd Yaacob. We are continuing with part 2 on dumbing down on architecture education, where we came across this particular post in Facebook by Muhammad Shafri Abdul Samad in Malay language, and I've translated it to English using Grok. So I'm just going to read the comment and discuss about some things here. There are many things actually with this comment that we could talk about, but I would like to focus on architectural education if I can, because we're talking about the dumbing down of architecture education. Here we go. When makeup artists are prioritized, but heavy work is sidelined. Let me give you a heads up what is meant and was confirmed by the author that I mentioned earlier, that this makeup artists are architects. And he is working in a project as a consultant. He is a civil engineer, as I understand it. So forgive me if I have the facts wrong, but this is what I found out so far. And it is a very interesting piece that caught the eye of architects, and they posted it. I actually saw this earlier, but because people I know posted it, and the conversation was, meh. The architects agree, but they don't agree with the architecture education stuff in a way, but that's a different story altogether. Let's go into this. When makeup artists are prioritized, but heavy work is sidelined. In the real world of development, civil, construction, infrastructure, and related fields, those who measure the land and design to prevent collapse are the foundation. But in the world of perception, those who draw pretty plans and decorate buildings are often put first. This is how our system operates. Surveyors must go to the site first. They measure the land in the rain, navigate through bushes, and chase sunlight. Engineers, meanwhile, are forced to design based on reality, the shape of the land, structural loads, groundwater pressure, and all the things that can't be conjured up on a whim. But when it comes to the meeting room, who do people wait for? The makeup artist's plan, full of colors, tree shadows, water fountains, and falling leaves. A project won't move forward without precise survey work, and it won't be safe without sound engineering design. But these two professions are often left in the background because what they produce lacks the wow factor to be flashed on a big screen during project pitches. Take, for example, the slope section drawing I shared. Surveyors provide accurate ground level data. Engineers use that data to design piles, retaining walls, and drainage systems. But sometimes all of this can be bypassed when the makeup artist plan says, we want to keep the original layout because it looks neater. They forget one thing: the land doesn't follow plans. The earth doesn't bow to aesthetics, and gravity doesn't care about taste. If you truly want a building to stand for 30 years, asked the surveyor, What's the actual slope? Asked the engineer. How deep do we need to dig? Don't ask the makeup artist first. What color should the staircase lights be? We're not against makeup artists. We know that they have a place in the team, but when they're made the main decision makers and the voices of surveyors and engineers are treated as mere suggestions to be ignored, that's when projects start to lose direction. So actually, this particular paragraph is what the grouse or the rant is about with this particular post, because this one is the turning point, where the consultants are not being consulted properly. Besides the architect, the other consultants felt that their suggestions are not being listened to. So that is the main paragraph just now. I will continue until the end. Surveyors and engineers aren't assistants. They are the backbone. Without them, makeup artists wouldn't even know where to start. Without them, everything that looks pretty on paper will collapse on site. So when you ask who's most important in development, the answer isn't the most creative person. The answer is the one who understands the earth best, is closest to the ground, and knows how to ensure the building doesn't become an open grave, quote unquote, 10 years from now. It doesn't collapse. And one more thing, if you're wondering why so many young makeup artists these days are increasingly out of touch, here's the honest answer. They lack on-site experience. That's when the architecture education criticism comes in. This person who's an engineer has a point. And the person is a male, so I assume it's he, and who notices things with the younger architects, the young makeup artists. So he continues with, they learn to design spaces but know nothing about the structure beneath the floor. When they need info on slopes or pile depths, they just type, quote, please send site photos, unquote, in the WhatsApp group while sitting in an air-conditioned room, sipping Starbucks, Zeus coffee, or the like. They're great at talking about, quote, form and space, unquote, but when asked, quote, is this site rocky or clay, unquote, they're completely lost. And even when they're clueless, they're the ones pulling out all the stops with their Super Saiyan tactics known as fire spin and blame. So don't be surprised when projects get delayed, crack, or need redesigns. Some act like they can design the world but have never stepped foot on the ground. Those doing the heavy work don't ask for respect, but when makeup artists are given too much power, the project itself starts looking for a way out. This is basically a rant. This is like, I gotta express what I feel after this particular consultation or consultants meeting with the client, in which the client was talking to the architects most of the time and saying, yeah, we can do that. And the engineers and surveyors said, yeah, but you got to do this, and it's not listened to. And it gets them actually in terms of how they are not listened to, and they are looking at the graduates, the younger architects. Well, it could be a general thing rather than that project itself where they have never been on site. Now, I have a criticism with architecture companies that rely on people who has not had site experience doing work from the design office and talk a lot and not really gone to the sites before. This could be happening to this particular person, encounter with such architectural office. Now, if you are the director of the office, you would be concerned about this comment if it's directed to you, and your work ethics, which is reflected by your architects. Because there is lack of respect given to you, and whose fault is that? Now that's the practice side. I first try to frame this argument with the practice. But the thing that I'm getting from this person is there's the generalization of younger architects. They've never been on site and probably think that that's not important. I think that's the bread and butter of architects, which to me need to be taught even in the architecture school. I don't know the context of your country, but in my country, if students of architecture at the universities do not have the experience of going on site and the experience of understanding construction well and how that relates to drawings and reading of drawings, they don't understand about architecture at the second year level, at least. If you have them going on in the first year, that's great. Possibly in the materials and construction workshops or some site visit and looking at sites being constructed firsthand, or even taking note of how site works progress. Of course, as an architectural graduate, you can start anywhere in the industry, but you cannot lie to yourself and other people. Just say you decided to be involved in contract implementation stage or tender documentation, where you need to be in contact with the other consultants, in particular sloping sites. And you can't bluff your way through this, because you need to go to the site as well with the engineers to work with them. There is this thing that's happening with this post, is that there's not a great deal of dialogue or conversation between the consultants, and the assumption is that you work something out with the client, and the client loves your drawings, but the engineers and surveyors is not consulted well enough or communicated well enough at even the initial design stage. And there's something problematic with this. In the beginning, when you talk about a land or a site, especially if it's a sloping site, the first visit, the architects deal with the other consultants. It's very important, actually, the lay of the land, topography, and the gradient, and so on, and how difficult the site constraints could be. And why is that not happening? The junior architect, anyone in the team, need to be as well going to the site, because they need to figure out, and they need to work with these surveyors and engineers. Because you cannot guess things. You have to walk on the site or understand the constraints, because being not true to the client, you say you can do this and that form, and the engineers will just have to go and work out from your drawings how to resolve it structurally. The cost implementation. Well, if the client says, okay, do whatever, we want to have this concept done on the site. But there must have been something that the practicality or the sensibilities of the site, when it's talking about this post by the civil engineer, talking about how the most important person, the backbone of the project is the civil engineers, because they are critical of the architect. And they don't see the architect trying to understand the lay of the land and to work with the land as well. I mean, the drawing, I'm not going to post it here, but the drawing they accompanied looks as if, you're not really following the lay of the land and you just have to build on top of it. A structure that doesn't follow it well, it's not staggered, it's just diagonal and not taking in what's happening on the land. I do feel that there's some sort of frustration from the poster or the owner of this post. And why is it in architecture education we have this problem of not really understanding what an architect is? Even if you're in the not diploma, but you could start with diploma, but even in a degree course, you're designing a course for architects. You're not designing a course for interior designer or others. What is the basic of your 3-year course? And how do you need to be taught?
Looking for creative inspiration? Graphite Pro Radio explores the intersection of design, culture, and innovation, one conversation at a time. Join us for deep dives into the creative process and game-changing ideas. Start listening today.
It's just an assumption that architects are not engineers and that engineers will handle those problems like civil engineers will handle the problem on site. But why does an architect, the master of everything, not doing some engineering and measurement or understanding the surveying aspects of a site? Why was that not be part of the curriculum? You talk about it in theory in a classroom setting, it's different than you talk about the practicality if you go to the land and you try to understand how to build on a slope. We kind of got lost because there's so many factors now happening. And in local universities in Malaysia, lecturers are only, based on their key performance indicators, they only serve 20% of their workload. And the rest is to do with research. It's really gone to a situation where you want to solve the problem of not being able to be one-to-one with a student and getting them to, finally the outcome of the teaching is the final outcome is they understand what an architect do, what other things the architects need to know. It's not coming through. The shortcuts are computer drawings, are resolving or imaginary or scenarios. Projects that are speculative or imaginary are getting more and more prominent, and it's not helping the students. Prioritize the type of projects that students need to learn in that 3 years. You can do it. You can have them actually going to the site and actually understand what land surveyors and civil engineers do. Yes, in the degree level. I don't think you need to wait until they go to the master's course. In the master's course, they are more advanced in understanding about site problems. So the design problem relating to engineering problem is also an architectural problem. And experiences that you have, sketching out observations, going to site in different environment, in, shall we say, in a heritage or historic area, at a mountain slope, or there are different things. Because when we look at our world, there are so many things like beach. We're no more in a pandemic situation where we can't visit these places. So I was teaching during pandemic COVID-19 time when the students, we cannot take out the students, but we should actually rejoice that we can take out the students now and bring them to site and really get them to maybe even calculate or understand what structural solutions are for certain sites. I mean, this is a practical hands-on thing in structure classes. There are people who could do that and teach that. Even architects can teach that if they know how to calculate and get the students to do the calculations as well. I mean, the most boring and mundane things is very important as well. The understanding that you're an architect and that you'll be dealing with the structural engineers. Aren't you supposed to not guess, but aren't you supposed to know what others do so that you'll get a step ahead, or you could know where they're coming from when they talk to you? And clearly in this post that I mentioned just now, they don't respect the architect, especially the young architect, because they don't know what they're asking for, and the way they look at design, construction, architecture is superficial, and just something that the engineers can't believe. The lay of the land. So that is all I would like to say today in this comment, in this podcast, and I hope that the insinuations that they mention here in the post to suggest that architects are just makeup artists is also to do with what's happening in society. It's just branding and marketing and pitching, and so you need to look good for the architecture, but how's that going to be later when we have to go and construct the thing? There's certain disrespect there, and this is at the core of architectural education, actually. Why has it come to this? Thank you for listening to another criticism on architecture education and how architecture education has shot itself on the foot with regard to architecture and architects. And I disagree about another comment on another post. You need to find the good students, top 10, to be your employees. And what happened to them? What happened to the others, the 90%? I'm not even talking about 90%. Just say if you've given a student of architecture a B plus or a B, and about 60% of your students got a B plus or a B, that means that you were successful in teaching them. Just say if your student that came out mostly are C's, then they were not taught well by yourselves. What did you do wrong in your school of architecture that many of them have C's, like maybe 60%? And how true is that grading that you did to reflect their skill level and how they would turn out as graduates later on? Even worse are schools of architecture that give a lot of A's. And then you're saying that it's contradicting, you see. It's saying that 10% of them are the ones that can be employed and have the sense of they're good students. They're good students by their own accord. They work hard. But the rest, how did you make these other students, the B's and B pluses, be proper architects material? So what I'm saying is, we are not teaching well because one of the issues is we only have 20% key performance indicators. I mean, this particular university that I had worked for, that I know, and I assume the other universities are the same because we're chasing rankings more than anything else. So it's a shame, really. Does the architecture profession know that this is happening? Are they concerned? So we are concerned about the dumbing down of architecture education in part 2. And thank you for listening. And I hope that you will continue with future sessions on this topic of architecture education and how it had come to this point. See you next episode.